Ladies and gentlemen, members of City Council, please attend a call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 6 o'clock p.m., Monday, July 23rd, 2012, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting. Mr. Cherry?
Yes, here.
Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Heretic?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Randall?
Here.
Vice Mayor Whitehurst?
Here. Yeah,
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Mr. Chandler?
Give Tim a note.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, as we start your public work session this evening, of course, our focus on tonight would be economic development-related matters. I wanted to mention to you just one or two quick agenda item changes. We do have with us Delegate Matthew James, who will talk about the tourism zones, and that will be our first leadoff speaker this evening. And of course, this represents some legislation that he actually authored, and talk a little bit about that and the potential that we could actually experience in our locality. The second item that we had listed was an item that was called Citywide Public Property Inventory. And I wanted to mention to you all, just kind of frame that up, we have postponed that item. This item represents probably about 2 years' worth of work. And if you recall, at one point, Council had expressed interest in getting information on all those properties that were under city's controlled or city ownership to a certain degree.
Complete inventory.
Complete inventory. So we have worked, the Economic Development Department, with CBRE to actually do that work, and we were ready to present that this evening. However, one of the things that we also recognize, too, is in some collaboration with our real estate assessor, that the CBRE work in terms of an inventory is not an appraisal, it's not a land evaluation. It is more of a marketing type tool from a brokerage type firm. So we probably can get a lot more longitude and latitude out of that information if you do work with the assessor who can give you appraisal related information. So in a short period of time, you'd be able to look at appraisal related information in addition to a market analysis.
Okay.
So we'll postpone that item and bring that back a little bit later.
Okay, very good.
All right. So in terms of a substitute, what we'll do is we'll give you the latest information that we have on our enterprise zone designation.
Okay.
And we'll have Mallory Kaler just take a minute or two to do that after Delegate James.
Okay.
So without any further ado, I'd like to recognize Delegate James. Thank you for being with us, sir.
My pleasure. Good evening.
Good evening.
Always fun to be back here and wear a different type of hat. With my economic development hat. I think there's a very interesting new incentive that we got to offer, and I was proud to carry the bill. I'll walk you through it, and then we can have a dialogue and some questions. The exciting thing is this is what one of the things when I decided to run for the General Assembly was to come up with substantive economic development tools. The neat thing about this bill is, or this law, since 2011 it was signed into law, it's locally driven. It gives the localities most of the flexibility to customize the program to their needs, and it provides them another incentive. And the incentives don't kick in until the project generates net revenue, and it offers very little liability to the locality. Basically, it came out of the governor's Executive Order 1 when he said he created a Governor's Economic Development Job Creation Commission, and I was on that. I was selected to be one of the legislators on that, and it came out of the tourism subgroup. They decided that they noticed that they looked around other states, and we had incentives to do all types of projects, but we didn't have any incentives to address tourism. And as you know, tourism is important. It's one of the cleaner ways to attract new people and new folks to the area. What it does do, though, it expands a version of the legislation that was passed in 2006 into a much more concrete program. Importantly, it generates new taxes. It doesn't raise taxes. It's no financial risk to either the state or the locality. As I said, it's locally driven. One of the things that it was very interesting when I was sponsoring the legislation, we got a lot of questions from localities because they said, well, why can't the state just tell us what to do? Well, this bill allows the locality to work in partnership with the state so they can customize it. It creates new jobs, and it benefits everybody. The legislation was introduced, as was said earlier, by myself on the House and on the Senate side, Tommy Norman. And it's just a way, it provides a standardization. For those of you, I'm sure Patrick knows this and Mallory, it's an expanded version of a power that Hotel Roanoke was built on, in which it allows the cities, the localities, to use a percentage of the new sales tax to solve what's commonly called in this environment a gap problem. Right now, if you try to put together tourism projects, the development community, the developer and the economic development folks will say you can get it up to 80%, but that last 20%, usually localities will have to offer some sort of customized incentive or even contribute to the project. What this tourism zone bill allows your locality to do, simply put, is it allows you to form a partnership with the private developer and the localities. What it does simply is the developer has to present a project that is 80% financed already. Without that, that's the entry point. He or they have to have 80% of the financing already in place. Then what it does is the locality can contribute 1% of the new sales tax that's generated from the project. The state contributes 1%, and the developer puts up another 1%. And that money can only be used against 20% gap financing to get it to market. For example, if the sales tax is at 5%, which it usually is, and so the state would keep at 3.5% of the new sales tax, and the city would receive 1.5%. That's the 1% contribution. So you would still keep 99% of the new sales tax, but 1% would go towards the debt service of the gap financing. Importantly, the locality does not pick up the liability if the project does not cash flow out. If the project does increase cash flow, the developer more than likely will go in and buy the city out so that they can reap the profits that will be a long-term. It's been really exciting to see this project develop. The governor, and I do have a copy of the press release in June. The first this type of financing was used at Fredericksburg. Newport News is very quickly using it. I think it just passed City Council, and they're doing it. And simply put, what it does is it's a three-step process that the city would have to do. The city would have to develop a tourism plan. What Newport News did is they developed 3 or 4 areas of the city that were unique, and they said we want to redevelop these areas, and which projects can bring an unmet need and new revenue to the city. And I think that's when I was looking back on my days as economic development. We came up with the vignettes around the vision plan that we had with Ray Gendros, and so you can compartmentalize and prioritize which areas you'd want to have, and then come up with a plan, and then develop. And then what you need to do, what they would do next, is they would send the plan, work with the state to make sure that it is a viable plan. And once the state approves the plan, then you would go to City Council. City Council would need to approve the plan, and then you would work with the developer, and you would move forward. You would identify the zones, and the collaborative partners at the localities that are using this, they've told me that they've worked with the tourism department, city attorneys, the usual stakeholders, the business community, but clearly it's something that they can get really excited about because it allows a locality to reshape its own identity and its destination, and more importantly, it allows a locality to do this type of project without having to dip into their own cash flow. Now they can use the cash flow, incremental cash flow coming from the project, and they can use the other cash flow for other needs such as education and what other priorities you may have. So that's it in a nutshell. We like to, as you all know me, I like to keep it simple and focused, and I think this was a bill that is simple and it's focused, and it allows you to come up with a plan. You can go to the website. It's www.vatc.org, and it'll walk you through the process in a lot more detail. But I know I was told I had 10 to 15 minutes, Mr. Manager and Mr. Mayor, and I always like to end up on time enough for questions.
Well, let me ask you, you say this model has been used in Fredericksburg?
Right
Where else
now.
in Virginia?
The bill was approved in 2011.
Oh, okay, so it's brand new.
It's brand new. What happened was it takes a time to walk through the process. In June, what's the date on it? On June 20th, Fredericksburg announced a new hotel development using this financing. Right now, there are several other municipalities throughout the state. Newport News has not received their financing of it. What they've done is they've received council approval of their tourism zones within the city. And there are several other cities that have contacted me or told me that they were using this. They were going to try to use this with a developer.
Okay, and the city can use up to 1% of its proceeds as collateral on the piece, and you say the state also 1%?
State gives
1%
of the new incremental sales tax.
all based on the news? Okay.
As they have defined the project. For example, the footprint of the project could be a new hotel. The footprint of the project could be a 4-city block. It depends on what you want to develop as a new project.
Gotcha.
And whatever is developed and generates cash flow,
Gotcha.
that's where that 1% will come into.
But the baseline is the developer has to already have the 80% at the table.
They have to have
That's a no-go.
80%
Okay.
already done, and you can do multiple zones. Newport News is looking at multiple zones within their city.
Okay, very good. Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mayor. Matthew, it does have to have a tourist component. Is that
It depends.
accurate? In other words, can it be a business within a zone that doesn't generate its revenue via tourism?
It has to have something that generates new revenue, and it has to be something that meets an unmet need. The tourism is pretty loosely defined, and that's a conversation that you would have to have with the Virginia Tourism Department. It would depend on your plan, because several companies, for example, smaller municipalities may not be interested in doing a hotel conference. It may just be a little retail area that's going to bring new people in and generate new shopping and new venues. It can even be used, I know some localities have talked about using it for a retail establishment or a retail area generated by one of the new movie theaters that you can sit down and have dinner, an expanded version of the Commodore over what Hampton has done. So it's based on how the locality defines maximizing their tourism.
Okay.
Right.
Our definition.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Does that?
Sounds good.
That makes
Any other
good
questions or
sense.
comments? Okay.
Makes sense.
Thank you, sir. Very
Thank you.
much.
Glad to be
Appreciate
here.
it. Keep up the good work.
I will try, sir.
We
Thank
need
you.
to, I'm sure we can utilize that in some capacity and find some identified projects that might enhance moving that forward. So thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yep.
One other question, Mayor, before you
Oh,
leave.
yes, sir.
And if we do get some ideas, you'll be willing to come back to share some things with us.
Absolutely. I live here.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Council.
I guess my question would be to, maybe to the manager, where do we go from here as far as establishing the process, getting the ball rolling?
Of course, we've already done some initial research on it, have some information from the other localities, and can actually make somewhat of a proposal for council to consider, what geographical areas you might consider with that as well.
Very good. Thanks.
All right. Good job.
All right.
Okay, next item.
All right, we're going to bring forth Ms. Mallory Kaler from ED to talk to you about enterprise zones. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing, Melanie?
Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. Chandler, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And always nice to follow Matthew, Delegate James, excuse me. Matthew, for those of you who don't know, hired me with the city of Portsmouth years ago, and so we go back quite a ways, and I owe him a great deal, and he taught me an awful lot and continues to. This evening, I'm with you in my capacity as our local enterprise zone administrator, and I'm here to share with you the results of our 2011 annual report to the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, the state agency that administers the Virginia Enterprise Zone program. And I'll run through a couple of things with you and give you a little bit of a reminder of some of the things about the enterprise zone, since you all don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. Again, it is, we have a relatively new zone. This is our second year. 2011 is our second year of this newly designated zone. We did have a zone way back in 1984, and it ran the gamut, and with your all's blessing, we made application 2 years ago and received a brand new zone with brand new boundaries and brand new local incentives. We've just filed our second annual report. We did a 2010 report and a 2011 report. As a reminder, the State Enterprise Zone program is a state and local partnership between the city and the state. It is a program designed to stimulate job creation, private investment, and revitalization. And it is a combination of both state and local incentives. And those incentives can be anything in the form of grants or loans or rebates or anything along those lines. Just to highlight some of the things from our 2011 report, as a reminder, our geography of our current and new zone runs from the downtown waterfront through all the way west to Midtown. It includes the Victory Village and Victory Crossing area, and it includes the Mass Center area. So we have 3 non-contiguous areas that make up our one state-designated zone. We did have activity throughout all 3 of those geographies this year. We also had activity among a number of our targeted industries that we have set forth. For example, there was activity among medical firms, retail firms, defense contractors, modeling and simulation firms, and companies that support the maritime industry. And the job creation was again throughout the 3 geographies of the zone, as well as among the variety of different industries. And it was both among new companies coming into the zone, as well as existing companies expanding in the zone. There was probably a theme of small employment hires. On average of our new companies, they probably hired 10, 11, or 12, and on average among those firms expanding, they may have hired 7, 8, or 9, and these are all just averages. But that's sort of a theme that I saw. It was both a combination of public and private investment, and the state, as Delegate James can share with you, does look to see that the locality and the public sector makes an investment in the geography and in the zone that is established, and you all spent close to $30 million within the boundaries of those 3 geographies through a variety of different public investments that you made during 2011, and this is calendar year 2011. On the state incentive side, there are 2 state grants. There's a job grant, and there is a real property investment grant. We had 2 companies apply for those 2 grants, and between the 2 of those companies, they invested over $1.3 million in real estate, and they hired about 50 people. In exchange for that, they received state grants that, for the 2 firms, totaled about $63,000. So you can see the state contributed job cash grants to those 2 companies, and we received the benefit of those jobs and that real estate investment. This was the second year in the history of the state grants that the grants were awarded on a dollar-for-dollar basis. The program was well funded, thanks in large part to Delegate James and his colleagues in the General Assembly, and they did not have to prorate those grants. So if somebody was eligible for a grant of a certain size, that is the grant that they obtained, and this is only the second year in the history of the program that we've been able to do that, or the state has. On the local level, we had a couple of our incentives utilized. PRHA's facade loan program was utilized, and one company took advantage of a low-interest loan and made improvements to their facade. The real estate assessors program, that is the rehabilitation tax exemption program, had 16 properties that were eligible and took advantage of that program within the boundaries of the enterprise zone. And there were two of our local incentives, the mixed use and the corridor streetscape incentives, that were not utilized this year. However, if you recall, both of those local incentives have a very high threshold. The projects must be at least $25 million in nature, and neither of those incentives are intended to be utilized every single year in the life of the zone. They're really meant to be targeted incentives that are to be there and offered throughout the life of the zone, not necessarily every year. Also, as a reminder, we have two local incentives that were new to this brand new zone that we adopted 2 years ago. They are grants for business personal property investment and machinery and tool investment. Neither of those were utilized. We did not have companies qualify for them. And you may recall we talked to you a few months back that we would like to come in, now that we've walked and talked to this enterprise zone for 2 years, and do some modifications to it. We'd like to sort of modify the boundaries and the geography just a little bit, and we'd like to modify these two local incentives. Plainly, we'd like to reduce the threshold since we set them too high. We shared a little bit of that with you all a few months ago, and now that we have the annual report behind us, we'll be putting the finishing touches on that and coming back to you all with our final recommendation of those boundary modifications to add a little more industrial property to the zone, as well as to request your permission to ask the state to let us reduce the investment thresholds on these two, both the business personal property grant and the machinery and tool grant. So that's just a brief summary of sort of our annual report that we submitted to the state, as well as a little refresher on those modifications that we've briefly talked about and will be finalizing to get into the state's hands, in the hopes that they'll approve and adopt those. I do have copies, if you would like them, of the actual written report that we submitted that I can share with you. And I also have, as a reminder, a copy of our incentive zone brochure that outlines both the enterprise zone and the other incentive zones throughout the city and the current incentives that are offered. That should look somewhat familiar.
Mallet, you said our boundary goes from downtown here, waterfront, all the way to the VMAS building? A continuous?
It's somewhat. On the brochure here, you can see the area outlined in red. The area outlined in red, because this covers every incentive zone we have in the city.
Okay.
The red boundary, if you look at the key, is just the enterprise zone.
All right, it excludes Old Town though. Okay, that was my
Correct.
point.
It
All right.
goes from the waterfront to Midtown, and then it drops off, and then it goes out to Victory, and there's a confined area in Victory, and then it goes out in a confined area in the Mass Center.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions?
Yes.
Brandon?
My question is that this information looks good, but how do we disseminate this information to potential investors who would like to come within our facilities of these opportunities?
Yes, ma'am. We market the Enterprise Zone program through a variety of ways. We have the brochure that we give to every prospect that we meet with. We have it, all of this information is also on our website, because oftentimes there are companies that look at the city and evaluate things without ever letting us know, and our website is often the way they do that. We also make a point of holding a series of workshops throughout the year in conjunction with the state agency that sponsors this program, and we do our best to send a targeted email as well as postcard to every property owner and every business that we can identify within these geographic boundaries, these 3 areas, to make them aware that they may have the opportunity. We posted it in our electronic newsletter that goes out to a couple of thousand businesses and folks throughout the city and beyond. So we do our best, but please spread the word. We need all the help we can get.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Thank you, Melanie.
My pleasure.
Great job.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Manager?
That's all we have.
Okay.
Motion to close.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. All right, have we got
Yes, we do.
any other items? Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Members of council, before you have a motion to go into a closed meeting.
Okay, before we go into close, anybody have any other items that we need to discuss here in open? Okay, thank you.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711 to discuss appointments to boards and commissions as per subsection 1, performance of a city employee as per subsection 1, pending litigation as per subsection 7, and the protection of privacy of individuals and personal matters not related to public business as per subsection 4. The subjects of the meeting are appointments, personnel matters, the case of Ethel Weaver versus City of Portsmouth, and a personal matter involving a former city official. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss these matters in confidence so as to protect the interests of the city and the privacy of certain individuals.
Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Heretic?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes?
Ms. Randall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Whitehurst?
Yes.
Mayor Wright?
Yes.
We are now in closed session.
Okay.